Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a world on the brink of revolution. A world where the whispers of freedom have yet to find a voice, where kings and parliaments dictate the fate of millions, and the idea of liberty feels like a distant dream. Into this world steps a man with words as sharp as a sword, words that would ignite minds and shape history. His name was Thomas Paine. Born in 1737 in a small English town, Paine grew up amidst the hum of tradesmen and the quiet struggles of the common people. He learned early that life was unfair, that authority often demanded obedience without reason, and that the power of an idea could challenge even the mightiest throne. But Paine did not merely dream. He wrote. He wrote with passion, clarity, and urgency, daring to question the established order, urging ordinary people to see themselves as capable of shaping their destiny. When he arrived in the American colonies in 1774, the fires of revolution were beginning to glow, and Paine was ready. Through his pamphlet, Common Sense, he spoke to the hearts of the colonists, calling for independence from Britain, framing liberty as a birthright, and insisting that government exists to serve the people, not the other way around. His words traveled like sparks, igniting courage and stirring debates in every town and village, turning ordinary citizens into revolutionaries. Tonight, we will drift together into the story of Thomas Paine, the radical thinker, the fearless writer, and the voice that helped birth a nation. As we explore his life and ideas, you'll discover how one person's words can ripple across centuries, inspiring generations to dream, question, and act. Before we begin, if you love unraveling history and drifting into stories of visionaries like Paine, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so every night can bring a new journey into the past. Chapter 1. Early Life and Education. In the quiet market town of Thetford, Norfolk, on January 29, 1736, or by the New Style calendar, February 9, 1737, a boy named Thomas Paine entered the world. His father, Joseph Paine, 1708 to 1787, was both a staymaker and a humble tenant farmer, a man of the Quaker faith, soft-spoken and disciplined. His mother, Frances Cock Paine, followed the Church of England, her temperament steadier and more traditional. Their household was modest, but rooted in a long lineage of English trades and simple devotions. Although some later claimed Paine changed the spelling of his surname after reaching America in 1774, records show he was already signing as Paine in 1769, during his years in Lewes, Sussex. As a child, young Thomas attended Thetford Grammar School from 1744 to 1749, in an age when schooling in England was not yet compulsory. At just 13 years old, he left the classroom and began learning his father's trade, working needle and thread into the stays worn beneath the fashions of the day. But Paine's path would never be confined to a single craft. At 19, restless and eager to see beyond the quiet lanes of Norfolk, he joined the crew of a privateer, serving aboard a vessel under the King of Prussia. After the churn of sea life, he returned to England in 1759, becoming a master staymaker and opening a shop in Sandwich, Kent. That same year, on September 27, 1759, he married Mary Lambert. But joy was fleeting. During the couple's move to Margate, Mary went into premature labor. Both she and their child died, leaving Paine in grief and financial ruin. In July 1761, he returned to Thetford and took a position as an excise officer. His duties shifted often. Grantham in December 1762, then Alford in August 1764, earning £50 a year. Yet the work was unforgiving. On August 27, 1765, he was dismissed for claiming to have inspected goods which he had not. Still determined, he petitioned for reinstatement on July 31, 1766, and was restored the very next day when a vacancy opened. While waiting, he supported himself by sewing stays once again. In 1767, he moved to Grampound, Cornwall, then left that post to await a better opening. For a time, he taught at a school in London. Finally, on February 19, 1768, Paine was assigned to Lewes, Sussex, a town steeped in anti-monarchical sentiment and early Republican ideas dating back to the 17th century revolutions. He lodged above Bull House, the tobacconist shop owned by Samuel and Esther Olive. Lewes widened Paine's world. He joined the court leet, served on the Anglican parish vestry, and became involved in local governance, assisting with taxes, tithes, and provisions for the poor. On March 26, 1771, at age 34, he married Elizabeth Olive, the recently orphaned daughter of the shop's owners, and entered the tobacco and grocery business himself. Between 1772 and 1773, Paine helped excise officers petition Parliament for better wages and working conditions. That summer, he wrote The Case of the Officers of Excise, a 12-page political pamphlet, his first published work. He spent the winter in London, distributing 4,000 copies to Parliament and beyond. But by spring 1774, misfortune returned. Paine was dismissed once more for being absent without leave. His tobacco shop failed. On April 14th, facing debtor's prison, he sold all he owned. He separated from Elizabeth on June 4th, 1774, and moved to London, defeated, but not yet broken. That September, fate intervened. George Lewis Scott, a mathematician and Fellow of the Royal Society, introduced Paine to Benjamin Franklin, the most influential colonial voice in Britain. Franklin advised Paine to emigrate to America and wrote letters of recommendation. Paine boarded a ship that autumn, arriving in Philadelphia on November 30th, 1774. A man battered by losses, yet standing on the threshold of a revolution that would soon need his voice. Chapter 2. Inside the Pennsylvania Magazine. The voyage that carried Thomas Paine across the Atlantic in late 1774 was no triumphant passage, but a brush with death itself. The ship's water supply had spoiled, and typhoid fever swept through the cramped decks, claiming the lives of 5 passengers. When the vessel finally reached Philadelphia, Paine was so weakened that he could not even stand to disembark. Waiting on the dock, sent by Benjamin Franklin, was Franklin's own physician. Seeing Paine's condition, he had the frail newcomer carried ashore and brought to safety. It took 6 full weeks before Paine regained his strength, 6 weeks in which a man who had lost nearly everything was given a second chance at life in a new world. Not long after recovering, Paine became a Pennsylvania citizen by taking the oath of allegiance at a very early date. And in March 1775, scarcely 4 months after setting foot on American soil, he stepped into the role that would ignite his voice, editor of the Pennsylvania Magazine. Before Paine's arrival, the American colonies had seen 16 magazines rise and collapse, each relying heavily on reprinted material from England. Late in 1774, however, Philadelphia printer Robert Aitken announced a bold plan, a magazine rooted not in London's intellect, but in the ideas of the colonies themselves. An American magazine, he called it.
Paine contributed 2 articles to the very first issue in January 1775, and Aitken, recognizing both his talent and his fire, hired him as editor the following month. Under Paine's guidance, the magazine's readership surged. Its circulation soon surpassed that of any American magazine up to that time. Though Aitken imagined the publication as politically neutral, Paine had other instincts. In that first issue, he declared that every heart and hand seems to be engaged in the interesting struggle for American liberty. Politics, for Paine, was the lifeblood of a nation awakening. He believed the magazine could become a nursery of genius for a country that had passed the state of infancy. It would educate the American mind, sharpen its reasoning, and help shape the moral backbone of a people on the brink of defining themselves. On March 8, 1775, the magazine published an unsigned essay titled African Slavery in America. Later accounts, most notably a letter from Benjamin Rush, support that Paine himself was the author. The essay condemned slavery as a detestable commerce and an outrage against humanity and justice. It was one of the earliest and strongest abolitionist writings printed in the colonies. But Paine did not write only for the learned or the elite. Determined to reach working people, he filled the magazine with discussions on the rights of laborers, encouraging broader participation in public life.
Historians would later describe this shift as part of the modernization of political consciousness, a democratizing wave that brought more voices, ordinary voices, into the American political sphere. And so, in a city alive with debate and restless with ideas, Thomas Paine began the work that would soon change the course of a revolution. Chapter 3: The American Revolution. There are many who say that Thomas Paine earned the right to be called the father of the American Revolution. It was not through command on the battlefield, nor through the strokes of a statesman's pen, but through the fierce clarity of his pamphlets. Among them, none was more powerful than Common Sense, printed in Philadelphia on January 10, 1776, attributed simply to an Englishman. Its success was immediate, astonishing even. Paine later estimated that 100,000 copies had moved through the hands of the roughly 2 million people living in the 13 colonies within just 3 months. Over the course of the entire revolution, biographers speculate that as many as 500,000 copies may have circulated, including pirated editions. Though historians debate the precise numbers, none doubt its impact. Originally, Paine had chosen the title Plain Truth, but his friend Benjamin Rush, an ardent supporter of independence, suggested the sharper, more democratic name, Common Sense. Even then, securing a printer courageous enough to handle such a provocative manuscript was no small task. Acting on Rush's advice, Paine entrusted the job to Robert Bell. By the time the pamphlet appeared in January 1776, the first shots of the American Revolution had already echoed across the colonies. Common Sense spread through taverns, workshops, and marketplaces, often read aloud to crowds who hung on every word. It became one of the most influential sparks that fanned Republican ideas, strengthened the call to separate from Britain, and stirred enlistment for the Continental Army. What Paine offered was not merely an argument for independence, it was a new way of thinking, urging a complete break from the long shadow of history. He wrote with urgency, pushing readers toward an immediate choice. For those anxious and uncertain, his words offered clarity. For those weary of tyranny, they offered hope. His fiercest attack was reserved for the one figure many still hesitated to blame, King George III. While colonial anger had focused mostly on Parliament and royal ministers, Paine declared the king himself responsible. The monarchy, he argued, was not simply flawed, It was absurd. Common Sense became the most widely read pamphlet of the entire American Revolution, a rallying cry against a corrupt crown and a call for America to embrace its providential role as a sanctuary for liberty. Paine's ideas were not wholly new. His brilliance lay in expressing them through a clear, vivid style, unlike the ornate, scholarly writing favored by many of his contemporaries. He crafted a political voice suited for the democratic society he imagined one day taking shape. Scholars have credited the pamphlet's success to many forces: historical timing, Paine's accessible prose, his democratic spirit, his use of psychology and ideology, and the simple fact that he made complicated ideas understandable to ordinary people. Through Common Sense, Paine carried ideas long debated among the elite into homes, taverns, and public squares. Though the pamphlet had limited direct influence on the Continental Congress's decision to issue the Declaration of Independence, it shaped the broader moral and emotional landscape in which that decision was made. Paine also introduced a particularly forward-looking idea: the belief that republics were inherently peaceful, a concept scholars now recognize as an early expression of democratic peace theory. Not everyone welcomed Paine's work. Loyalists attacked Common Sense fiercely. One rebuttal, titled Plain Truth, 1776, by Marylander James Chalmers, dismissed Paine as a political quack and warned that without monarchy, society would degenerate into democracy. Even some revolutionaries resisted Paine's radicalism. Late in life, John Adams called the pamphlet a mass of absurdities, disliking Paine's belief that even men without property should be allowed to vote or hold public office. In response, Adams published Thoughts on Government in 1776, advocating a more conservative form of republicanism. Historian Sophia Rosenfeld later observed that Paine's genius lay in how he wielded the idea of common sense itself. Drawing on both Scottish common sense realism and continental Enlightenment thought, Paine combined the notion that ordinary people could make sound judgments with the idea that reason could dismantle outdated institutions. He used common sense as a weapon to undermine monarchy and question inherited truths. Rosenfeld concluded that the pamphlet's extraordinary appeal came from blending popular instincts with elite ideals during a moment of national awakening. Historian Robert Middlecouth noted that Paine's message resonated because it echoed long-held American beliefs. He declared monarchy irrational and rooted in paganism, a device of evil itself. Pointing to the Old Testament, Paine reminded readers how kings had led Israel astray. He condemned both monarchy and aristocracy, the two ancient tyrannies, as violations of natural law, human reason, and the divine order of the universe. To many Americans, particularly those who had lived through the Great Awakening, this sounded like truth. Middlecouth described the revolutionary generation as children of the twice-born, united by spiritual experience, transcending sects and ethnic lines, and carrying with them a deepening sense of American identity.
Chapter 4. Perhaps a Hand in the Declaration. As the warm summer of 1776 settled over Philadelphia, the air inside the halls of the Continental Congress felt heavy with expectation. The colonies were on the brink of a choice that would reshape the world, and inside those rooms, quills scratched across parchment late into the night. Yet somewhere just beyond the circle of candlelight, unofficial, unrecorded, and still debated 2 centuries later, stands the faint silhouette of Thomas Paine. There are no surviving records proving that Paine helped draft the Declaration of Independence, and yet, like a whisper carried across the years, many scholars have wondered. The Thomas Paine National Historical Association notes that historians such as Moody, 1872, van der Weyde, 1911, Lewis, 1947, and more recently Smith and Rickards, 2007, all explored the possibility that Paine's hand, steady, bold, unmistakable, may have touched the earliest shape of America's founding words. Then, in 2018, something remarkable surfaced. The association introduced what may be an early draft of the Declaration, bearing a small but powerful clue: the initials TP, written on the back of the document. Attached to this mysterious marking was a phrase suggesting that a copy had been made with the permission of TP. This clue is linked to a moment on June 24, 1776, when John Adams hastily produced what is now known as the Sherman copy, a handwritten version of the draft prepared so that fellow committee member Roger Sherman could review it before the full committee of 5 refined the text for Congress. Adams made this copy quickly, just before preparing a cleaner version preserved today in the Adams family papers at the Massachusetts Historical Society. But on the back of that working draft lies the inscription. Perhaps the original with Jefferson, copied from the original with the permission of TP. Who was TP? The association believes it was Thomas Paine. What does it mean? That remains a midnight mystery. The original draft referenced in the inscription has been lost or destroyed, leaving only speculation. But the idea that Adams sought Paine's permission suggests something intimate. Perhaps Paine helped Jefferson arrange the ideas, polish the arguments, or strengthen the philosophical spine of the Declaration itself. We cannot know for certain, but history often hides its truths in shadowed corners, and sometimes those shadows look very much like Thomas Paine. Now, settle in, breathe slowly, and when you're ready, we'll drift onward to the next chapter in the life of a man whose words stirred a nation awake.
Chapter 5. Naming the United States. As June 1776 stretched long and uneasy across the American colonies, the air was charged with tension. Rumors of treaties, fears of foreign intervention, and the quiet dread that Britain might soon divide the colonies before they could act. Newspapers echoed scattered anxieties, brief and sharp like distant thunder. Amid this world of uncertainty, one voice rose with startling clarity. It belonged to Thomas Paine. On June 29, 1776, writing under the bold pseudonym Republicus in the Pennsylvania Evening Post, Paine urged Congress to adopt a true national title, one that would allow the new government to stand before the world not as a collection of rebellious colonies, but as a nation. A name that would carry weight, dignity, and purpose. A name that, within days, would appear in the Declaration of Independence itself. Paine wrote, "Whenever I reflect upon the state of the country, I am more convinced of the necessity of a formal Declaration of Independence. Reconciliation is now the thought of knaves, fools, and madmen, and as we cannot propose terms of peace to Britain until we, like other nations before us, agree to call ourselves by some name, I shall be exceedingly pleased to hear the title, the United States of America, that we may have a firm basis on which to treat for peace."
Republicus. Historians today widely connect Paine to the rise of the title the United States of America. He argued that only a capitalized national designation could convince foreign governments that the colonies were no longer a loose alliance, but a single American nation, ready to negotiate alliances on the diplomatic stage. Historian James H. Hudson describes the moment as one filled with widespread anxiety, fear that Britain might broker a partition treaty before Congress could declare independence. Newspapers warned that European powers would not remain neutral unless American envoys carried a clear and official statement of national identity. By late June, these fears appeared in scattered columns across Philadelphia. One, written by Republicus, warned that European powers will not remain long neutral. Unless we declare independence and send embassies to seek their friendship, Britain will soon have to take sides against the United States. Even among moderate Whigs and cautious Tories, those who still clung to loyalty to George III, there was an uneasy recognition that the colonies risked being carved apart. Paine's call for a national name was more than language. It was a plea for unity, sacrifice, and shared identity. A name, he believed, carried obligation. It bound the colonies together. And in just a few weeks, that same urgency would thunder through the first lines of The American Crisis, rallying a young nation once more. Now, let the lamps dim, let the room grow still, and drift deeper into the unfolding story of the man who helped a nation find not only its voice, but its name.
Chapter 6. The American Crisis, 1776. By the closing months of 1776, the American Revolution stood on unsteady ground. Bitter winds swept through the encampments. Morale was fading, and the shadow of the British Army loomed over the fragile hope of independence. It was in this winter of fear and uncertainty that Thomas Paine once again reached for the power of words. That year, he published the first of his pamphlet series, The American Crisis, written to ignite courage in the hearts of Americans as they struggled against British forces. With deliberate contrast, Paine painted a divide between the steadfast, virtuous citizens devoted to the cause of liberty and the self-interested, small-minded men who shrank from sacrifice. General George Washington, recognizing the spirit within Paine's writing, ordered the very first pamphlet of the American Crisis to be read aloud to his weary soldiers. The words drifted through the frigid camps like a spark catching dry tinder, quiet at first, then powerful. The pamphlet opened with a passage that would become immortal. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. 'Tis dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. In that cold December, Paine's words became more than ink and paper. They became a lifeline. A reminder that even in the darkest hours, courage could rise, and freedom, though costly, was worth every sacrifice. Chapter 7. Diplomat in the Shadows. The Silas Deane Affair. As the revolution pushed forward into uncertainty, 1777 became a turning point in the life of Thomas Paine. That year, he stepped into a new role, Secretary of the Congressional Committee on Foreign Affairs. It was a position that carried both responsibility and quiet danger, for diplomacy in wartime America
was a world of secrecy, delicate alliances, and fragile trust. By 1778, Paine's fiery pen, so often a source of strength, became a source of trouble. In a series of pamphlets, he hinted at the secret negotiations with France then underway. To some, they were harmless slips. To others, they were reckless revelations. Enemies seized upon the moment, accusing him of carelessness. A scandal erupted, fueled by tensions already brewing between Paine and powerful figures such as Robert Morris and Silas Deane. By 1779, the storm became too great. Paine was forced to resign from the committee, leaving his post with little more than wounded pride and not enough money to buy food. Yet, even in disgrace, the revolution had not finished with him. In 1781, Paine travelled to France alongside John Lawrence, working to secure the aid the young nation so desperately needed. Slowly, recognition for his contributions returned. New York granted him an estate in New Rochelle. Payments from Pennsylvania and from Congress, encouraged by George Washington himself, followed. During the war, Paine also served as an aide to the renowned General Nathaniel Greene, weaving his life ever deeper into the fabric of American independence. But behind all of this lay the deeper fracture, the conflict history would remember as the Silas Deane affair. It began with Paine's suspicion that Deane, appointed in March 1776 to secure French support for America, had used his diplomatic position for personal gain. Paine believed Deane acted less like a patriot and more like a war profiteer, tangled in financial dealings with Robert Morris, the powerful superintendent of finance, and Pierre Beaumarchais, the French royal agent sent by King Louis. Paine uncovered what he believed to be troubling ties between Deane and Morris. He also saw how wealthy men, Morris, John Jay, and the nation's leading commercial bankers, held public office while benefiting from private financial dealings with the government. And Paine, as always, refused to stay silent. In the Pennsylvania packet, he wrote that France had opened their alliance with an early and generous friendship, a statement that risked embarrassing the French government by implying they had aided the colonies before formal treaties were recognized. John Jay, then President of Congress and a loyal supporter of Deane, reacted swiftly. Criticism grew louder. The controversy spilled into the streets, where Paine was attacked twice by Deane's supporters. Accusations of disloyalty mounted. Sensitive by nature and battered by the ordeal, Paine resigned from the committee in 1779.
For a time, he disappeared from public power, tired, broke, and deeply shaken. But history, like truth, has a way of resurfacing. Years later, after Paine returned from France, Deane's corruption became widely acknowledged. Even Robert Morris apologized. And in Philadelphia, where once Paine had been scorned, his name was restored. The storm had passed. The truth, as it so often did in Paine's life, endured. Chapter 8. The Public Good. In 1780, Thomas Paine turned his sharp mind and unwavering principles to a new cause: the lands west of the 13 colonies. He published a pamphlet titled The Public Good, in which he argued that these Western territories, once part of the British Empire, now rightfully belonged to the government of the United States after the Declaration of Independence, not to any of the 13 states, nor to private speculators. The origins of this debate reached back to 1609, when a royal charter had granted the Virginia Company lands stretching all the way to the Pacific. Wealthy land speculators in Virginia, including the families of Washington, Lee, and Randolph, had exploited this charter to survey and claim vast tracts, encompassing much of the western lands of the new nation. Paine's pamphlet boldly claimed that these lands were the rightful property of the United States, represented by the Continental Congress.
His arguments angered many of his wealthy friends in Virginia, including Richard Henry Lee, once Paine's close ally in Congress, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, all of whom had personal claims to large swaths of wilderness. Yet Paine's stance ultimately prevailed, influencing the adoption of the Northwest Ordinance in 1787, which established federal control over these western lands. The hostility Paine faced after publishing The Public Good pushed him and Colonel John Laurens to take on a daring mission, a journey to Paris to secure funding for the American war effort.
Chapter 9. Funding the Revolution. Paine accompanied Colonel John Laurens to France and is thought to have initiated the mission himself. They arrived in March 1781 and returned to America in August, bringing 2.5 million livres as part of a larger contribution valued at 6 million livres, along with a 10 million livres loan. Meetings with the French king were likely conducted with guidance from Benjamin Franklin, who provided invaluable introductions. Upon their triumphant return, Paine, and perhaps Laurens, vehemently opposed General Washington's suggestion that Congress compensate them for their efforts, fearing it would set a dangerous precedent. Paine also forged connections with influential figures in Paris and helped organize the North American Bank to fund supplies for the Continental Army. In 1785, Congress awarded him $3,000 in recognition of his contributions. Meanwhile, Henry Laurens, father of John Laurens and former ambassador to the Netherlands, had been captured by the British while returning from Europe. After his exchange for prisoners, including Lord Cornwallis at the end of 1781, Paine traveled to the Netherlands to continue negotiations for a critical loan. Though questions lingered about the roles of Laurens and Paine versus Robert Morris, the superintendent of finance, and his associate, Thomas Willing, it was clear that the essential work of securing the funds for the North American Bank belonged largely to Paine and the Laurens family, not Morris. In 1783, Paine purchased his only home in the world, a house at the corner of Farnsworth Avenue and Church Streets in Bordentown, New Jersey, where he would live intermittently until his death in 1809. In 1785, he was elected a member of the American Philosophical Society, a recognition of his intellectual contributions. 2 years later, in 1787, Paine proposed an iron bridge across the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia. Although the project did not receive funding, he returned to Paris to seek investors, continuing his lifelong drive for innovation. In France, with few friends aside from Lafayette and Jefferson, Paine relied on Benjamin Franklin, a trusted advisor, for letters of introduction to potential collaborators and supporters. Later that year, Paine returned to London, and on August 20th, 1787, he published a pamphlet titled Prospects on the River Rubicon, or An Inquiry into the Causes and Effects of Political Measures to be Discussed in the Session of Parliament. Tensions between England and France were rising, and Paine urged the British Foreign Office to reconsider the consequences of war with France. He sought to influence public opinion to prevent the devastation of conflict, avoid war taxes on ordinary citizens, and maintain peaceful relations between the nations he held close to his heart. Chapter 10. France and the Rights of Man. Back in London in 1787, Thomas Paine could hardly have imagined the storm that awaited him across the Channel. The French Revolution would erupt just 2 years later, and by 1790, Paine had made the decision to go to France, drawn by the promise of liberty and reform. Meanwhile, the conservative thinker Edmund Burke had launched a forceful critique of the French Revolution, publishing Reflections on the Revolution in France in 1790. Burke's words resonated strongly with the landed aristocracy and sold 30,000 copies, stirring fear and caution among Europe's elites. Paine would not be swayed. In 1791, he began his great response, The Rights of Man, a political treatise of 90,000 words, one that tore apart monarchy and traditional social institutions with precision and passion. On January 31st, 1791, he handed the manuscript to publisher Joseph Johnson, but a visit from government agents frightened Johnson. Undeterred, Paine turned to J.S. Jordan and, following the advice of the visionary poet William Blake, brought the work to Paris. He entrusted friends William Godwin, Thomas Brand Hollis, and Thomas Holcroft with the publishing details. Finally, on March 13, 1791, The Rights of Man was released, selling nearly 1 million copies. It found eager readers among reformers, dissenting Protestants, Democrats, London artisans, and skilled workers in the industrial North. Not content to rest, Paine published The Rights of Man, Part 2 in February 1792, boldly combining principle with practical proposals. He outlined a representative government and social programs to alleviate the crushing poverty of ordinary citizens, including progressive taxation. In doing so, he went far beyond contemporaries like James Berg, Robert Potter, John Scott, John Sinclair, and even Adam Smith. By pricing the pamphlet low to ensure wide circulation, Paine's words spread like wildfire, inspiring reform societies across Britain. Of course, the government did not take kindly to Paine's ideas. Authorities pressed charges of seditious libel against him and his publisher, while agents stirred mobs, fueled hatred, and burned effigies. Flyers circulated, both attacking and defending him, as public debate raged. Eventually, the authorities succeeded in forcing Paine to leave Britain, and he was later tried in absentia and convicted, though safely beyond British reach. A French translation of The Rights of Man, Part 2, appeared in April 1792, with translator François Lantenat removing the dedication to Lafayette, believing Paine had overestimated Lafayette's influence. He was seen as pro-royalist at the time. By summer 1792, Paine responded to accusations of rebellion and libel with unwavering conviction. If to expose the fraud and oppression of monarchy, to promote peace, civilization, and global commerce, to break the chains of political superstition and elevate the deserving poor, if these are libel, then let the name of the libeler be carved upon my tomb. Paine became a devoted supporter of the French Revolution and was awarded honorary French citizenship, joining luminaries like Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, and Benjamin Franklin in recognition of his work. Though he did not speak French, he was elected to the National Convention, representing Pas-de-Calais. Weeks later, he was selected as one of 9 delegates on the Constitutional Committee, tasked with drafting a suitable constitution for the French Republic. He worked on the Girondin constitutional project, voting for the Republic but opposing the execution of Louis XVI, known as Louis Capet after his deposition. Paine proposed exile to the United States instead, both as a nod to France's support for the American Revolution and as a matter of moral opposition to capital punishment. Paine's speech defending Louis XVI was interrupted by Jean-Paul Marat, who argued that Paine's Quaker beliefs disqualified him from voting on executions. Marat interrupted a second time, claiming the translator had misrepresented Paine's words. Paine was compelled to provide a written copy to prove his speech had been accurately conveyed. He wrote much of The Rights of Man, Part 2, at the desk of Thomas Cleo Rickman, with whom he stayed in 1792 before fleeing to France. Today, that desk is preserved at the People's History Museum in Manchester. Aligned with the Girondins, Paine increasingly drew the disdain of the Montagnards, who had risen to power after the insurrection of May 31st, June 2nd, 1793. He also came under scrutiny because of personal enmity with Gouverneur Morris, the US ambassador and friend of George Washington. Revolutionary authorities, including the Committee of Public Safety and Committee of General Security, sought to curry favor with Morris and, by extension, the US, making Paine a particular focus of attention.
Chapter 11. The Age of Reason. It was December 28, 1793, when Thomas Paine, that tireless champion of liberty, found himself arrested in France under the orders of Marc-Guillaume Alexis Vadier. Despite the efforts of his friend Joel Barlow, who circulated petitions among Americans living in Paris, Paine remained a political prisoner. 16 American citizens petitioned on his behalf, but Vadier refused to acknowledge Paine's US citizenship, insisting he was an Englishman, and therefore a citizen of a nation at war with France. Paine protested, asserting that he was indeed a citizen of the United States. Yet Ambassador Morris remained silent, and Paine later claimed that Morris had colluded in his imprisonment. For days, Paine's life hung by a thread. A chalk mark, meant to signal which prisoners were to be executed, was mistakenly placed on the inside of his cell door rather than the outside. The oversight, coupled with Paine receiving official visitors at the time, meant he narrowly escaped the guillotine. Fate, it seemed, had spared him just long enough to witness the fall of Robespierre on July 9, 1794. Finally, in November 1794, Paine was released, largely thanks to the efforts of the new American ambassador to France, James Monroe, who successfully argued for Paine's recognition as a US citizen. By July 1795, he was reinstated to the National Convention alongside other surviving Girondins. Though worn, ill, and disheartened by his captivity, Paine remained steadfast. On July 8, 1795, encouraged by his friend François Lantenat, he spoke at the convention. He was one of only 3 representatives to oppose the new Constitution of 1795, objecting to the removal of universal male suffrage guaranteed, at least partially, by the Montagnard Constitution of 1793. Even in exile, Paine's inventive mind did not rest. He held a British patent for a single-span iron bridge, developed a smokeless candle, and collaborated with the inventor John Fitch on early steam engines. By 1797, Paine resided in Paris with Nicolas Bonneville and his wife, Marguerite Brazier. Amidst other controversial guests, Paine stirred suspicion. Bonneville had sheltered Antoine-Joseph Baruel-Beauvert, a royalist, who was later prosecuted following the coup of 18 Fructidor, September 4, 1797. Paine, meanwhile, began to feel that the United States, under President John Adams, had betrayed revolutionary France. In 1800, while still under surveillance, Bonneville sought refuge with his father in Évreux, and Paine stayed to help translate the text, The Sea Covenant. That same year, Paine reportedly met Napoleon Bonaparte, who confessed that he slept with a copy of The Rights of Man beneath his pillow, even suggesting to Paine that a golden statue should be erected in his honor in every city of the world.
Paine also discussed strategies for invading England, writing in December 1797 2 essays, one titled Observations on the Construction and Operation of a Navy with a Plan for the Invasion of England and the Final Overthrow of the British Government, proposing the funding of 1,000 gunboats to transport French troops across the English Channel. By 1804, he revisited the topic in To the People of England on the Invasion of England, though he soon denounced Napoleon as
the greatest fraud that ever existed, disillusioned by the emperor's drift toward dictatorship.
Chapter 12. Critique of George Washington. Even more personal was Paine's disappointment with President George Washington, once a friend during the American Revolution. Washington had taken no action during Paine's imprisonment in France, and Paine felt deeply betrayed, suspecting collusion with Robespierre. While staying with Monroe, Paine planned to send Washington a letter of complaint on the president's birthday, but Monroe intervened. After Paine criticized the Jay Treaty, which Washington supported, Monroe advised him to live elsewhere. Undeterred, Paine wrote a scathing letter to Washington, portraying him as an incompetent commander, vain and ungrateful. Receiving no reply, Paine turned to his longtime publisher Benjamin Bache, a Jeffersonian Democrat, to publish his words in 1796 as Letter to George Washington. In it, he mocked Washington's reputation, calling him a traitor, unworthy of his fame, and questioning whether Washington had ever truly held principles at all. Paine asserted that, without France's aid, Washington could never have succeeded in the American Revolution and gained no glory in the final event. He also critiqued Washington's character, describing him as cold and hypocritical.
Chapter 13. The Later Years. Thomas Paine remained in France until 1802, when he finally accepted an invitation to return to the United States from President Thomas Jefferson. Ever generous, Paine also paid for the passage of Marguerite Brazier, Bonneville's wife, and the couple's 3 sons, Benjamin, Louis, and Thomas Bonneville, for whom he had long acted as godfather. Paine returned to America during the early years of the Second Great Awakening, a time of deep political division. The Age of Reason, his earlier work, had already given devout critics plenty of reasons to dislike him, while Federalists attacked him for the radical ideas he had laid out in Common Sense, for his close ties to the French Revolution, and for his friendship with President Jefferson. On top of this, the public still remembered his Letter to George Washington, published 6 years earlier, which did not endear him to the establishment. Matters were made worse when Paine was denied voting rights in New Rochelle because Governor Morris refused to recognize his citizenship, and Washington did nothing to help. On the morning of June 8, 1809, Thomas Paine passed away at the age of 72 at 59 Grove Street in Greenwich Village, New York City. While the original building no longer stands, a plaque now marks the spot where he breathed his last. After his death, Paine's body was taken to New Rochelle, but the local Quakers, honoring his wishes, refused him burial in their cemetery. Instead, he was laid to rest beneath a walnut tree on his farm. In 1819, the radical English agricultural journalist William Cobbett, who had published a hostile continuation of Francis Aldis's biography of Paine, exhumed the remains and transported them to England, intending to give Paine a hero's reburial in his homeland. That ceremony, however, never took place. The bones remained in Cobbett's possession for over 15 years and were eventually lost. Over the years, many claimed to possess parts of Paine's remains, including his skull and right hand, though none of these stories have been verified. At the time of his death, most American newspapers simply reprinted Paine's obituary from the New York Evening Post, itself quoting from The American Citizen, noting simply, "He lived long, did some good, and also caused much harm." Only 6 people attended his funeral, 2 of whom were black, likely freedmen who had known him. A few months later, A hostile biography by James Cheetham appeared, recounting a complex mixture of admiration and dispute over Paine's life. Decades later, the orator Robert G. Ingersoll would reflect on Paine's life. Thomas Paine had passed beyond the limits of legend. One by one, almost all his friends and acquaintances had abandoned him. Reviled from every quarter, cursed, ostracized, his virtues condemned as vices, his achievements forgotten, his character maligned, he remained calm and balanced in spirit. He was a victim of the people, yet his faith never wavered. He was still a soldier in the army of freedom, striving to enlighten and uplift those who awaited his passing. Even those who loved their enemies hated him, their friend, a friend of the world, with all their hearts. On June 8, 1809, death came, the almost only companion he had. His funeral was without ceremony, without pomp, without civil procession, without military display. In a carriage rode a woman and her son, sustained by the generosity of the deceased. On horseback, a Quaker, whose heart prevailed over dogma. And walking behind, two grateful black men. This was the funeral of Thomas Paine. Through it all, Brazier cared for Paine in his final days and ensured his burial. In his will, Paine left most of his estate to her, including 100 acres, 40.5 hectares, of his farm, so she could care for and educate Benjamin and Thomas Bonneville. Chapter 14. Ideas and Vision. Biographer Eric Foner once noted a recurring theme in Thomas Paine's thought. Through this new language, he conveyed a new vision, a utopian image of an equal, republican society. Paine's utopian imagination blended civic republicanism, a faith in the inevitability of scientific and social progress, and a steadfast commitment to free markets and freedom of speech. His diverse intellectual sources all pointed toward a society guided by the common good alongside individual liberty. Paine envisioned a kind of political messianism, a redemptive future for humanity. He wrote that his generation would appear in the future as the atom of a new world, exemplifying a distinctly British utopian ideal. Paine's encounters with Native Americans left a lasting impression on him. He admired how the Iroquois lived in harmony with nature while maintaining democratic decision-making processes. These experiences helped him refine his ideas about organizing society. A firm opponent of slavery, Paine declared himself an abolitionist. As Secretary of the Pennsylvania Legislature, he helped draft a law prohibiting patriots from participating in the international slave trade. His famous statement, "Men have no property in men," used in Rights of Man to argue against binding future generations, also stood as a condemnation of slavery. In the same work, he described his mission as including breaking the chains of slavery and oppression. On March 8, 1775, just a month after becoming editor of the Pennsylvania Magazine, the publication printed an anonymous article titled "African Slaves in America." This was one of the first calls in the colonies for emancipation of enslaved African Americans. Paine is widely believed to have written it, supported by later testimony from Benjamin Rush, a fellow signer of the Declaration of Independence. During the American Revolution, the British offered sanctuary to enslaved people fleeing American masters. Paine criticized this policy in Common Sense, noting that the British incited the Indians and the blacks to destroy us. Later, he and Joel Barlow unsuccessfully urged President Jefferson not to allow slavery in the Louisiana Purchase,
suggesting instead that he work with free black families and German immigrants to address the issue. In Rights of Man, Part 2, Paine proposed an ambitious program of state-supported social welfare, including state-funded support for the poor, universal public education, and pre- and postnatal care, along with financial aid to families at childbirth. Recognizing that the labor of a man must end before old age, he also called for state pensions for all workers beginning at age 50, doubling at age 60.
His final pamphlet, Agrarian Justice, published in the winter of 1795, criticized agricultural laws and monopolies, expanding on ideas from Rights of Man about how land ownership had deprived the majority of people of their natural inheritance and means of independent subsistence. The US Social Security system later recognized agrarian justice as the first American proposal for old age pensions and basic income, sometimes called a citizen's dividend. Paine wrote, "In defending the case of those so deprived, it is a right, not a charity. The government should establish a national fund which shall pay every person upon attaining 21 years, £15 as compensation for the loss of their natural inheritance through the system of land ownership, and also £10 per year throughout life to each person currently 50 years old, and to all others as they reach that age." Paine argued further that all accumulation of personal property, beyond what a man produces by his own labor, is acquired by living in society, and by every principle of justice, gratitude, and civilization, he owes a portion of that accumulation back to the society from which it came. Scholar Lamb has argued that Paine's analysis of property marked a significant contribution to political theory, combining liberal concern for private property with a commitment to equality. Paine's reasoning on property distinguished him from earlier theorists like Hugo Grotius, Samuel von Pufendorf, and John Locke. In response to agrarian justice, Thomas Spence wrote Rights of Infants, critiquing Paine's plan as insufficient for the poor, suggesting that landowners would merely raise prices, enriching themselves rather than giving the community equal opportunity. Paine also vehemently opposed fiat money, seeing it as government fraud. He declared, "The punishment for a legislator proposing such a law should be death." In his essay on Government, etc., published in February 1786, he condemned paper currency, arguing that the reason given for paper money is that there is not enough gold and silver. This is not a reason for issuing paper money, but a reason against it. Chapter 15. Legacy. Historian Jack P. Green once remarked, "In essence, today we are all descendants of Paine. It was not the British defeat at Yorktown, but Paine and the new conception of political society that Americans sought to spread in Europe that truly shook the world." Harvey J.K. wrote that through Paine, through his pamphlets and memorable lines like, "The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth," "We have it in our power to begin the world over again," and "These are the times that try men's souls," Paine achieved more than merely inspiring Americans to declare independence. He imbued the nation they founded with a drive and a democratic aspiration, with purpose and extraordinary promise, truly of global historical significance. For 230 years, Americans have drawn ideas, inspiration, and encouragement from Paine and his works. John Stevenson observed that in the early 1790s, numerous progressive political societies were established across England and Wales, and Paine's writings raised the confidence of those seeking to enter politics for the first time. Gary Cates argued that, in the immediate sense, Paine's vision united Philadelphia merchants, English artisans, French peasants, Dutch reformers,
and radical intellectuals from Boston to Berlin in a great movement. Over the long term, Paine's works inspired progressive thinkers and the working class in England and America. Liberals, advocates of individual freedom, leftist reformers, feminists, democratic socialists, social democrats, anarchists, and progressive thinkers often regard him as an intellectual ancestor. Paine's critique of institutionalized religion and his promotion of rational thought influenced many British freethinkers in the 19th and 20th centuries, including William Cobbett, George Holyoake, Charles Bradlaugh, Christopher Hitchens, and Bertrand Russell. In 1835, at just 26 years old, Abraham Lincoln wrote a defense of Paine's deism. A political associate, Samuel Hill, later destroyed the manuscript to protect Lincoln's political career. Historian Roy Basler, editor of Lincoln's writings, noted that Paine strongly influenced Lincoln's style. No other 18th century writer except Jefferson matches the mood or core ideas in Lincoln's later thought. Stylistically, Paine more than anyone brought a diversity of expression, refined and adapted to Lincoln's personal tone, clearly evident in his official works. Inventor Thomas Edison also spoke highly of Paine. "I have always regarded Paine as one of America's greatest. Never have we had a mind so profound in this country. I was fortunate to encounter Paine's works in my youth. Reading the great thinker's views on political and theological matters was illuminating. Paine taught me things I had never considered. I remember the flash of insight his writings provided, and I remember thinking, it is a pity that these works are not textbooks for every child."
My engagement with Paine's works continued, reading and rereading them from childhood onwards. In 1811, Venezuelan translator Manuel Garcia de Sena published a book in Philadelphia, mainly translating Paine's most important works into Spanish. It also included translations of the Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, the U.S. Constitution, and several state constitutions. This work circulated widely in South America, where Uruguayan national hero José Gervasio Artigas encountered and absorbed Paine's ideas. In turn, many of Artigas's works, including the 1813 Directive, were directly inspired by Paine, shaping Uruguay's foundational principles and asserting independence from Buenos Aires. The first and oldest memorial to Paine was a 12-foot marble column in New Rochelle, New York, commissioned and funded by publisher, educator, and reformer Gilbert Vale, 1791 to 1866, and executed by American sculptor and architect John Frazee in 1839. New Rochelle also housed Paine's original small house and 320-acre, 130 hectares, farm, awarded to him in 1784 by the New York State Legislature for his contributions to the American Revolution. The site now hosts the Thomas Paine Memorial Museum. In the 20th century, Joseph Lewis, longtime president of the Freethinkers of America and an ardent admirer of Paine, helped erect life-sized statues of Paine in the three nations most connected to the revolutionary writer. The first, sculpted by Gutzon Borglum of Mount Rushmore fame, was placed in Montsouris Park, Paris, just before World War II, but officially unveiled in 1948. It depicts Paine pleading before the French National Convention to spare King Louis XVI. The second, sculpted by Georg J. Lober in 1950, stands near Paine's former home in Morristown, New Jersey, showing him seated using a drum as a makeshift desk. The third, by Sir Charles Wheeler, president of the Royal Academy of Sculpture, was erected in 1964 in Thetford, England, Paine's birthplace, with a quill in his right hand and a reversed copy of The Rights of Man in his left, prominently displayed on King Street. In 2002, Paine was ranked 34th in the BBC's nationwide poll of the 100 Greatest Britons, cementing his legacy as one of history's most influential thinkers. Chapter 16. Closing. As we close the pages of Thomas Paine's extraordinary life, we are left with the echo of his ideas, reverberating through centuries. From the quiet streets of Thetford to the revolutionary halls of Philadelphia and Paris, Paine's words dared to imagine a world governed by reason, equality, and justice. He challenged kings, questioned churches, and inspired nations, leaving behind a legacy that reminds us that even a single voice, armed with courage and conviction, can change the course of history. But Paine's story is not just a story of the past. It is a mirror for our present. His call for liberty, for social fairness, for the empowerment of ordinary people still speaks to us today. It invites us to ask ourselves, how do we use our voices? How do we stand for what is right, even when it is unpopular or dangerous? History, as Paine showed us, is not only written by heroes, it is shaped by those who dare to think, question, and act. If Paine's journey has stirred your curiosity, or if you feel inspired by his vision of a fairer, freer world, you can continue exploring with us here. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another story from our Bedtime History series. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Which part of Paine's life moved you the most? His fight against tyranny, his vision for equality, or his fearless questioning of religion and tradition? Every like, comment, and share helps us bring more stories like this to life. Join our community of curious minds, and let's keep discovering the past together. Because the lessons of history, as Thomas Paine knew, are meant to guide us toward a brighter, bolder future. Sleep well, dream big, and remember, the world is always in the hands of those brave enough to imagine it differently.